In another development, the International Monetary Fund has warned Nigeria and other oil-producing countries in Sub-Saharan Africa to expect dwindling oil revenues in the coming years as the world transitions from fossil fuel to cleaner energy. In a new report, the fund said oil exporters in Sub-Saharan Africa should target buffers of around 5 to 10% of gross domestic product to manage large swings in oil prices. This means that Nigeria will need to maintain an annual fiscal surplus of at least 1% per annum over the next 10 years. Now, according to the report, most of the exporters in the region have accumulated enough savings to ensure against unpredictable oil price changes, maintaining that sovereign wealth fund in Sub-Saharan Africa holds assets of just 1.8% of gross domestic product compared to 72% of Middle East and North Africa, forcing countries to borrow to draw financial assets whenever oil prices fall. The IMF in its latest regional economic outlook showed that oil prices have fluctuated from lows of $23 per barrel to a peak of $120 in the last 2 years, resulting in high uncertain revenues in oil-dependent economies. Well, let's go to our first topic of discourse now. On May 29, 2023, when the newly inaugurated president of Nigeria settles down behind the desk of Aso Rock Villa, that's in Abuja, he will be confronted with a daunting basket of problems that will be of no envy to anyone. On top of the list of the economy, it has gone into recession 3 times in the last 7 years. But our focus for today is the power sector. Some believe that the country's electrical power framework is in a mess. The country provides less power than the government met in 2015. Well, that is arguable. Maintenance and modernization and electrical grid power stations, transformers and transmission lines have virtually collapsed. In some cases, no hope at sight. It would indeed be a formidable task for one man to undertake. Let's discuss the merits of challenges as we attempt to set an agenda for Nigeria's CEO in 2023. My guest understands the issues in the power sector. He's an associate professor and a former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. He's Dr. Sam Amadi. Dr. Amadi, compliments of the season, and thank you so much for your time on the show. We appreciate this.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I want to start this way with the value chain in the electricity sector, where the gas suppliers tell you that we have enough gas to supply, but we are being owed and we are not being paid. The transmission guys will tell you we have about 12,000 megawatts to transmit, but the distribution companies are not taking this power. They are rejecting it. Then the discos at their end will tell you we want cost-reflective tariff. Where do we start from? What is your understanding of all of these issues?
Well, it's a case of a household. The husband says, look, I have certificates, I'm talented, and I'm ready to work, but I have no work to do. The mother, the wife, and the mother says, if I have money, I'll prepare goods too. So everybody has what they expect they will do. But the problem is, how would the whole value chain be tackled? First, let's talk about gas. If you don't commercialize the sector well enough, and if the discos themselves are not, look at their performance. I mean, they're not up to half of the power they receive, they can sell and remit back to the bulk trader. So that means that, assuming there's enough, Nigeria is a gas country, so obviously we have enough molecule to power our power plants. But what we don't have is the commerciality, the creditworthiness, so that the gas to power market is not very solvent. We're not paying as we ought to pay. 2, the transmission network to carry gas to the generation companies where they are has a problem. So those governance and commercial issues are there. Now, if you talk about the distribution company themselves, they will talk about cost of electricity. But let's look at it. If you look at where we are before the reform, where we are now in terms of the price of electricity, we have made some significant improvement. So the tariffs may not be exactly what the market wants, but they're not that very bad that the market should not work with them. And again, the regulatory process is that, end of the day, even if there are shortfalls, the regulator will make it up for them. So we have a crisis that's endemic, a systemic problem, because the distribution owners themselves may not have the capacity to invest in long term and rely on tariff to improve. Because that's why this sector is a long tenure sector. You make long-term investment. And if the basics in terms of, for example, customer numbers are not credible, so sometimes you look at the figures, the data they are working with, their change management strategy. People are complaining about something as simple as the replacement of meters, customer care, things that will inspire consumers to take more of the rate shock in order to help the sector grow. They're not doing those basics. So the question then is, would they be enough to say our problem is tariff, or is a systemic problem that requires a high dose of regulatory intervention? On the whole, I think the way to look at this sector is this way. We privatize, we are doing a reform. The basics of that reform may not add up. We need to take a second look at the diagnostics. You see, when you look at the problem, maybe the problem is not just malaria, but because the science looks like malaria, you are treating malaria, and you discover upon closer examination that this problem is more than malaria. This problem probably requires some kind of surgery. So in 2000, when we had the national elite power policy, we came with the market fundamentalist ideology that if it's not working, it's because it's public sector. So once you get to private sector, there's a magical way it will start working. We didn't look at corporatizing well, commercializing well. When I was chief regulator, I made that point very clear that the structure is to fully corporatize and commercialize. Then you build the corporate governance, the change management strategies, the regulatory support, then you move into privatization. And you sequence it in a way that you don't do shock therapy. But we are driven so much by ideology. And some of the fundamentals we didn't do. Look at Egypt. They are still under government ownership largely. But they are able to add 20,000 megawatts of power. They have better raw electricity markets. South Africa is now having problem trying to move to a private sector-based market. But they have the capacity. So really, I think there was some assumptions that are now proven deadly wrong that we need to correct. And the way to go about it is to look at short-term, long-term, and medium-term. In the short term, I think we need a new government to move away from the chronism and the level of the lack of efficiency of the current government in terms of leadership. Okay, if you have good leaders in the sector, well, the first thing they will do is to improve short term, meaning things as they are. There are many slippages, many inefficiencies that we can really optimize, improve things, and get maybe 4 or 5 hours on the minimum improvement in power supply. Maybe get the discos to remit the market contribution up to 70-80% as we're doing when we're there. Maybe get the gas suppliers to be paid up to 80% of their invoice, in which case you incentivize the whole value chain, and you'll be able to say, okay, even if we have only capacity for 6,000 megawatts, let's be able to reel out and supply to homes and businesses 5,000 megawatts on the everyday. That will be a significant improvement in power supply. Then you will now lay out framework for the medium to long term. And the first thing you have to do is to get knowledgeable, non-partisan persons to review the whole national electric power policy. We did it in 2000, which is about 22 years today. And the market has moved significantly. The assumptions about the economics of public sector has changed all over the world. So you can't keep that fundamental error of assuming that the private sector is the answer without having an efficient, effective public sector. So I think the new government should rethink the national electric power policy, develop a new potential roadmap that starts with using regulation to improve operations of the discos and transmission company. Maybe we move into ISO, take the transmission company, open it up to independent system operator and transmission service provider that are independent and market-owned, maybe using public trust. And then these entities will run on a commercial basis. And because the public trust, the market participants will have stake in making sure that the transmission system works very well and works for everybody, non-discriminatory dispatch. Now you come down to the generators and improve their capacity. Gas supply, of course, they need to also ramp up capacity. And then ultimately, there will be a new conversation with Nigerian public to say, look, this sector is not cut and dry, like we said. It's not a sector where private sector comes and everything is okay. We need to take in more price adjustment because this is a trade-off. Price adjustment will give you more hours, will give you better service. And I think ultimately, we might need to unbundle distribution in two ways. One, you need to give states back the control of consumer affairs. There's no point next sitting in Abuja running customer care across the 36 states. It's not possible. You have to have the state public service commissions or state logistic consumer commission run the consumer side of the network in their states. Of course, using next regulations on customer care and prices and other economic regulations. The idea is once they have feet on the ground in their states and customers feel their impact, then it's possible for them to enhance efficiency downstream, customer-wise. It's possible also to increase tariff because the consumers will be satisfied with improvement in customer care. Those basics have to be taken by the states, while NEC regulates the wire business, the network and distribution, and of course, the transmission and the generation. I think we need to do those kind of structural, disruption and recreation, but without creating additional political risk of saying, oh, we cancel privatization. No, don't cancel privatization. Improve privatization through regulation and through policy. Let everything be done through market-based process so that everybody sees the process for choosing winners. There are some operators who may have to leave the market, but they will leave the market through a structured regulatory approach where the regulator sets new benchmark for performance. And when they fail, the market will ease them out and bring new institutional investors who will now fill the gap and drive up performance. What we should never do is to discontinue the policy in a political manner. We should not come and truncate privatization. No, we should come and use regulation and new policies to take out those who are not performing and bring in those who will replace them in a market-ordered peer review process. I think that's the short-term, long-term process for getting this market reset in 2023.
A lot said there, very analytical there as usual, and I was able to pick a lot in your submission, Dr. Amadi. But let me follow up with something that everybody always want to talk about, which is metering and all that we've heard about metering. We had MAP scheme at the time, and later government came up with this national metering policy that took away MAP off the scheme and came up with that. But even as we speak, the metering gap is still on the high side. Some say that also needs to be addressed if we are to move forward. Whose responsibility really is it to meter customers considering the basics of privatization? And on that, let's take it up from there.
Okay, so the market logic is very simple. Everything in the market is paid for through the tariff. So the discos have the obligation and arguably the revenue to meter their customer. But what happens is that when we privatize, there was a 5-year commitment, I think. Discos say we're going to meter within a 5-year span. This is how we're going to roll out our meter. So the regulator ought to hold them account for how they will meter their customer. But what we have seen from the data is that none of these discos, or if any, maybe one or two, are able to meet their metering target, which means they are creating gaps. And don't forget, as new houses are built, as people become house owners, then the metering gap keeps increasing. So even if you are meeting your target today, if you are not aggressively increasing, you are expanding the gap. Then when you're not meeting the target, you are actually widening the gap very enormously. So the discos today have probably, that's why after 5 years, since 2013, they took over, the metering gap remains about only 43 to 45 customers, percent of the customers in Nigeria are metered. It was 40, 42 when they took over. It's still 42 to 45 after many years of taking over. What that tells a story that they are not metering as much as they undertook. They're not metering as much as the increase in customer numbers. Again, government intervenes because meter could be a public good in this market in the sense that without metering, you are not going to have the capacity to increase the tariff as you ought to. Why is this so? Because when people have meter and the tariffs are increased, the first thing is rate shock, volumetric impact. That means if I used to consume, let's say, 50 kilowatt hour per week, for example, and the tariff has gone up by 50%, it means that my monthly or weekly tariff would be double by 50%. Then to mitigate that, I may reduce. I put off the light in the afternoon. I don't put the AC on. I open the windows more often. What I'm doing is that I'm reducing the impact so that by the end of the month, maybe I have 32 instead of 50 kilowatt hour for that week. And therefore, my cost will be less. That depends on metering. If I don't have a meter, there's no way I can engage in conservatory behavior. And therefore, it's a loss for me. I get slammed with higher tariffs, have no ability to reduce my cost, and that's terrible. And that's why some consumers bypass. But when you have a meter, you provide consumers and customers with a basis for mitigating their rate increase, a basis for conservatory behavior and energy efficiency. Now, on the disco side, when their customers are metered, then they are sure of the revenue. They can predict the revenue based on use. There are nobody's stealing power or those who are being estimated, either underestimated. So metering becomes an important part of the puzzle. And that's why government has stake in it. But the problem is that, look, the policies they're rolling out don't solve the problem. They are still dependent on the disco's performance to get those programs work. So if you're going to allow the discos do that, they use a more economic regulatory process, which is what the CAPME that we did aim to do. CAPME is a superior policy because CAPME says when a consumer pays, you are bound in 14 days to meter them. And the cost, what they have paid, is put in an escrow account, which the licensed certified installer has incentive to install more. So by working around the incentives, the CAPME process guarantees more and better and higher rate of rollout of meter than what we have today. So I think there's a need for government to rethink it. And again, looking hindsight, what we didn't do well. If government had asked the discos, those who purchase these assets, not to pay money, but rather to provide financially verifiable investment plan or meter that are bankable, that are enforceable. And so we know that, look, these guys are going to come in, the money they spent paying government, they would have all in 1 year clearly and demonstratively metered all their customers. So they use the proceed of this of sale to provide meters and improve the installations to enable power to become more available. So what we did was that we privatized, took the money, pay off workers who are still there. So the winners in all this are the workers who are paid off and they're still working. So, and then there's no money to invest. These owners just took loan and bought assets, don't have access to more capital to invest in massive meter rollout or invest in upgrade of their installation. That is where we got it wrong. So when I said that the model was wrong, was wrongly designed, that's what I mean. We could have catered more to metering, catered more to investment post-privatization, and less about the revenue that investors pay to government, because those revenue went back into workers who are still working, who are not productive then, and also some to public corruption, and none went directly to deal with the crisis of metering, which are the things you need for efficiency post-privatization.
Dr. Sam Amadi, I'm going to have to let you go now, but I guess we're going to have a part 2 of this discussion where we talk about how to attract investments, how to also, open up that sector more to make it competitive and all of that as we move on into the year. Thank you so much for your time, despite your tight schedule, being able to join us on the show. We really appreciate you. Dr. Sam Amadi is the former chairman of NERC, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Thank you for your contribution once again and enjoy the season.
Thank you very much.